think it was natural disasters, drought, disease, or catastrophic earthquakes. And for some, the answer can be found in the ancient Maya calendar. It may have predicted their demise in the 10th century, and it ends in the year 2012. Today, millions believe that fateful year marks the end of days, the apocalypse.
I'm Don Wildman in western Belize, near the Guatemalan border. Back in the day, this was the heart of the Mayan world. Right now, I'm in the middle of nowhere. But look at the buildings and temples they left behind. They're huge. This was an advanced civilization. They were geniuses in math, astrology, and engineering. And then they practically disappeared. And the jungle just swallowed everything. The only way to find ancient Mayan sites was to spot unusual-looking hills or mounds from the air, or machete to them right through the jungle. But once they started uncovering sites like this, they found evidence of bloody warfare, ritual sacrifice, and a prophecy of doom. And the deeper underground they went, the uglier the picture got.
The modern country of Belize is the heart of the ancient Maya world. Today, the population is only 300,000, making it one of the least densely populated countries in the world. And the terrain is rugged and remote. But just over 1,000 years ago, the population was over 1 million, and major Maya cities dominated the landscape. The Maya's sudden disappearance has baffled experts for decades. But as they began finding clues under the jungle floor, a terrifying picture began to reveal itself. Some of the most important and gruesome discoveries were made in a remote cave buried deep in the Belizean jungle, where the skeletons of men, women, and children were found, sacrificed in bizarre and bloody rituals.
Finding ancient underground sites here in Belize isn't like going to Paris, Rome, or London. It's always out here in the thick, overgrown jungle. The best evidence of ancient Mayan sites is always in really, really remote places I couldn't find on my own. So I got in touch with a top expert who knows this place, ancient Mayan sites. He's been in every cave in the country.
Jaime Awe is perhaps the most respected Maya expert in all of Belize.
You're ready for a trip to the Underworld.
He was taking me to a remote cave called Oktun Tunichil Muknau, or ATM. It's a 20-mile drive from the nearest town of San Ignacio, then an additional 3-mile hike that crosses the same river 3 times.
So we're going over rivers and through the jungle.
That's right. We have 3 river crossings. If it's a little high, it could be exciting.
Because of recent rains, the level of the river has risen dramatically. But crossing these rivers is the only way to see rare evidence of human sacrifice and find out why the Maya would venture into the dark underworld.
If you were to clear this forest, there are thousands of mounds that were the residences of the people who inhabited this river valley. Today, we know that there are actually more ancient buildings in this country than modern houses.
Really? Okay, here we go again.
This river's way strong, really rough on the bottom.
We'll be going down this little hill to the entrance of the cave, and it's really slippery, so you want to be careful.
Although 1,000 years ago this was a well-populated area, venturing into this cave meant desperate times. If the Maya made the treacherous journey to perform a gruesome human sacrifice, it meant the end was near.
How are we getting into this thing?
Well, we're going to have to jump in there, into that pool,
Yeah.
swim up a little bit, probably about 20, 30 feet, and then we'll hike in.
We're swimming into this cave.
That's right.
After a 3-mile hike through the jungle and 3 river crossings, we had finally reached the heart of the Maya underworld.
Into the lair of the gods. Wow, this is a massive cave.
The Maya considered caves to be the domain of gods. When drought, famine, and war began to devastate their cities, they had to venture here to make their painful and often deadly sacrifices.
Well, you can really see why this was the entrance to hell, huh?
That's right. This was the portal to the underworld.
Look up there. Look at that. Jagged shapes. Looks like teeth.
This may be why the Maya considered places like this the belly of the earth monster.
Right, because we really are inside the earth here, huh? And going further.
The entrance to the ATM cave is through a small pool fed by a stream that runs from deep inside the mountains. The early Maya preferred to make sacrifices near the mouth of caves, rather than venture inside and anger the gods. The ATM cave stretches over 3 miles beneath the Belizean jungle. Some of its chambers reach 150 feet high, connected by winding, narrow passages. We had gone almost 500 yards into the cave, up the river, and finally reached a massive central chamber, the scene of a bloody sacrifice.
Space is insane. Look at this.
If you look over here, what we have is a grinding stone.
That's where it was left by them.
Exactly where we found it. But that's not the only thing they offered.
Right.
The Maya also conducted auto-sacrifice, bloodletting rituals.
Bloodletting.
That's right. There were various types of bloodletting. They would take obsidian blades or stingray spines, and they would pierce the tongue and catch the blood and offer the blood. Or sometimes they would pierce the thumb. Sometimes even the foreskin of the penis. Often they would drop this blood onto bark paper and burn the paper, and then the essence of life goes up with the smoke.
The Maya believed the heart, blood, and human breath were sacred substances that connected them to the spiritual world. So they offered these up to their gods to ensure the continuation of the cycle of life. Piercing the penis was their offering for human fertility. Although it was incredibly painful, the Maya elite, those closest to the gods, performed these rituals on themselves.
It's an incredible room here. It looks like it was made for this purpose.
Yes, and I think that the same way that you and I perceive this like an altar room, so did the Maya.
But when bloodletting didn't work, the Maya went even further into the cave and began offering up more than just their blood.
Don, we're in the middle of the Underworld, and you got to be very careful where you step. What we have here is the skull of a male individual.
So why is he here?
This guy was a victim of sacrifice. The Maya believed that earth spirits, fertility gods, and rain gods reside in caves.
So by sacrificing a human, they're asking, begging for the pity of the gods, their mercy.
They are. And again, I often say, when is it that you pray the most? When things are going bad.
It wasn't just men who were sacrificed. Jaime found evidence of women who were brutally killed. In fact, Jaime was the first person ever to discover this horrifying scene.
Well, Don, here's...
Oh, wow.
Another one of these.
That's amazing. She's so complete. That's the first thing. And you found this.
I was the first archaeologist to ever come into this cave, and I still recall that day walking up this section and looking at this. I mean, I was dumbfounded.
Blew your mind.
After further investigation, Jaime discovered that this Maya woman had been disemboweled, with her entrails offered up to the gods.
What would drive anyone to have to do this? What kind of desperation were they feeling?
Around 750 to 800 AD, we know that Maya population has reached sort of a maximum. A lot of the land has been cleared. They're starting to get desperate because their crops aren't growing. People are doing rituals and ceremonies to the gods, petitioning the rains to come, and the rains don't come. So you start to get a little more desperate. So you start to go deeper inside the cave, offering your people in sacrifice. So this is what we have.
When sacrificing their men and women didn't work, the Maya went to the most morbid, disturbing measures to appease the gods. In the bowels of the ATM cave, they resorted to their last hope, the killing of infants.
If you look carefully, okay, up here you can still see some of the fragments of the skull. We know that the Maya, whenever they did any rituals, they liked to use things that were pure, uncontaminated, virginal if you want.
Sure.
And what is more uncontaminated or virginal than a child?
So this is a gift, the ultimate gift to the gods.
That's right. There's little doubt in my mind that the reason they're doing this is because of drought.
And for this, they made the ultimate sacrifice, begging for rain.
Oh, they do. And of course, it fails. And what happens? They leave. They abandon this area.
A great drought could have triggered the end of the Maya. But beneath one of the great Maya cities, there's evidence that brutal warfare left its bloody footprint on the Maya's final days. Belize is home to the second largest unbroken barrier reef in the world. It stretches nearly 200 miles and has one of the most diverse ecosystems found anywhere on Earth. When the great Maya civilization vanished 1,000 years ago, the jungle swallowed just about every trace of their empire. At the turn of the century, archaeologists, adventurers, and treasure hunters began to explore these ancient Maya sites, and the race was on to find clues that would unlock the mystery of their disappearance. What they found revealed a people desperate to please their gods. As famine and drought devastated the region, rival cities began to fight bloody battles over what dwindling land was left. Soon, virtually the entire empire was at war.
This is Caracol, one of the biggest and most important cities of the ancient Mayan world. But it wasn't the only city around here. See, in those days, there wasn't a single Mayan nation. There were dozens of city-states battling each other over territory. The bigger the city got, the bloodier the war. Some say the war fought between Caracol and its arch rival, a city called Tikal, was one of the bloodiest battles ever fought here. Today, there's not much evidence of that war, but there is a tomb that paints a pretty gruesome picture of Caracol in its darkest days.
Caracol sits 3 miles from the Guatemalan border and just 50 miles from its rival city, Tikal. Deep inside Caracol's most sacred temple are lost tombs that were the site of bloody human sacrifices. But these weren't desperate pleas to the gods for rain. They were cruel warnings to their enemies of war. Luis Zaidan, a local guide, was going to take me inside.
How are you? Welcome to Caracol.
Thank you. That's a big building.
Yeah, I just came off Cana, which is the sky place, which is where the elites live. The king probably lived up on the top.
So we're in the middle of Caracol.
We're in the middle of the city. 8 miles, 3 miles, depending on which direction you're looking at. There were suburbs of Caracol.
And how many people in this city?
150,000.
Wow.
At its height, Caracol was a bustling city that stretched out 70 square miles. Kings watched over it from on top of the Temple of Cana, which is still the highest structure in all of Belize.
Why did they make these steps so steep?
Well, you know, Dan, people were, at that time, 5 feet, 4 inches. That was the average height. These steps were built like this to keep them humble. The kings live upstairs.
So this forces you on all fours.
Yes, it does.
Prostrate to the king.
But Cana, the temple to the kings of Caracol, is also where the kings and queens of their enemies were killed and ritualistically sacrificed.
I feel like I climbed a mountain.
Well, we did. This is on top of the mountain right here.
So this is a royal tomb.
Yes, this is the entrance to the Underworld.
Yeah? Going into a Mayan royal tomb right down here.
Caracol's royalty were entombed inside rooms like these, but the people of Caracol also used these dark caverns to perform bloody sacrifices on their rivals. Along with the temples, the tombs throughout Caracol were built in stages over hundreds of years.
You might as well build one building on top of another, like the layers of an onion.
We're looking at a layer of one building on top of the next.
Yes. This building on top of the one here.
I see.
And then you have a tomb here at the top.
Look at that. So each layer is a different time in Mayan history.
Yes.
These tombs were built along with the temple itself. Each generation of Maya ruler built on top of the temple of the previous ruler. As each new temple was erected, they left this space hollow and built around it, leaving behind the royal tomb. Caracol is dotted with ancient royal crypts, but as the temple of the king, none are as sacred as Cana. But the tomb wasn't just a resting place for the bodies of Caracol's kings and queens. There's evidence that the rulers of Caracol used this space for a much more sinister purpose.
I've even heard a story where a king, and he would have a cup made out of a human skull, probably a king that he captured, and he would drink out of it.
Caracol's bloodiest battles were with its neighbor Tikal, but by 800 AD, wars were breaking out all over the Maya world. When prisoners of war were captured, especially royalty, sacrificing them to the gods ensured continued domination over the area. This was the tomb where the gruesome ceremony took place. Enemy kings, queens, and high priests would be cut up into pieces to be sent back to their cities. A grisly warning that anything goes when it comes to defending the city.
Not all of it would have been delivered. Some, maybe your femur bone or your leg bone or something would have been kept by the people that captured you for a trophy.
The horror of all of this is incredible. I mean, this is a society that is unbridled in its violence.
Drought, famine, and overpopulation led to chaos. Land was scarce, times were desperate, and this was an all-out war for survival, so terror was often the most effective weapon. But sometimes the most terrifying tactics weren't saved for the enemy. They were used on their own people.
Heads were placed like hills in the plaza, in the open area, so everybody could see. Down in this area here where we have found 2 individuals that were were buried in a tomb with their legs cut off.
Why would they done that? Why did they do that?
You can, they could be deserters. It would have been very symbolic of don't do this anymore.
Things became so chaotic in Karakol that men began to leave their own army. There was no greater shame than desertion, so military leaders inflicted the greatest suffering on the deserters. But the disgraced warriors weren't buried in Kana, the temple of the king. They were mutilated and discarded in small, dark tombs.
There's a lot of tombs around here. Pretty much every building has multiple tombs in it, but here we go. Oh, yeah. Wow, there you go. That's a dark and nasty place. Look how intact it is. Done a little restoration, but the ceiling's still here. Yeah. Wow, a Mayan tomb.
In 2003, archaeologists removed mutilated remains from this tomb, possibly belonging to the shamed warriors of Karakol. It was a startling revelation. For ancient Maya soldiers to desert their posts meant they truly believed the end of the world was near.
That's how bad things had gotten, when honorable men risked everything to escape, to desert their own people, and prevent their own passage into the Underworld.
The horrors of war left a deep scar in Karakol's underworld. But while most of this great empire vanished, another city survived by going underground. While the U.S. has over 19,000 airports, Belize has 43, only 5 of which are paved.
I'm on my way to a Mayan city called Lamani, which roughly translates into a place of crocodiles. We're hoping to find out clues as to the disappearance of the Mayan culture and why it is that this place lasted longer than most. The road up here was washed out by the rain, so we're taking a boat upstream and keeping an eye out for the crocs.
Located on the west bank of the New River Lagoon, Lamani was once one of the largest Maya centers in northern Belize. It emerged as a regional power in 200 BC and continued to thrive long after most of the other Maya city-states in the region had collapsed. But why did this place thrive for close to 2,000 years while the rest of the Maya world disappeared? If we can find out why this city survived, we may find clues that will reveal why others vanished. Like other ancient Mayan ruins, most of the answers have been swallowed up by the jungle, but there's still evidence of their amazing survival underground. I took a boat up the New River to meet with Jaime Awe again.
That is insane.
That's
That
one of
just rises out of the jungle, huh?
That's right. And it's one of the tallest structures here at the site.
The ruins of Lamani stretch over 4.5 square miles. Less than 5% of it have been excavated. Aside from a few major structures, the jungle has consumed the homes of the 35,000 Maya who lived here.
Lamani was, a medium-sized city. It's like comparing New York City or LA with, let's say, Cleveland.
And this is Cleveland.
Yes, this would be Cleveland. And what's amazing is that, this is just one of many structures just as big. There's several more out there in the forest.
So why was such a relatively small city able to survive for thousands of years? The clues may still be scattered around the forest, but because the jungle has engulfed the city, they're difficult to find.
Just wait.
Fortunately, locals tipped off Jaime to the location of this unusual underground tunnel.
We're trying to find this Chiltun, this storage place, and it's been buried just like everything else back here.
Antonio, acá, no a la derecha.
Jaime, are we lost? Do you know where we are?
I think we're heading in the right direction. I see the trail continues here.
All right, so you think.
But these trails are often misleading because, they go off in different directions. So we'll keep looking.
Oh my God, look down. Look, we can see it just disappears. I thought it was just this hole here, but it keeps on going down further.
Finally, we had found what we were looking for, the entrance to a Maya cistern, or Chiltun.
So he says there's a lot of bats down there.
1,000 years ago, this would have been filled with life-saving water, or a stockpile of food.
What seems to have happened is that part of the roof of the chambers have collapsed in.
Oh, okay. Now, are these chambers all over this forest?
Yes.
These limestone chambers are called Chiltunar, and there are hundreds of them scattered beneath the jungle floor. It's thought that they were used by Maya families for either storing food or as water cisterns. While other cities were suffering from drought or famine, the people of Lamani had this secret stash.
So, a 2,000-year-old hole in the ground.
The Maya had abandoned this Chiltun 500 years ago. Since then, it's become a home for snakes, spiders, and bats.
I don't know what's down there, but let's find out. Wow, this really goes off, doesn't it?
It does.
See, look at that guy.
That little bat is actually right where the original entrance to this chamber might have been. Think of it like a bottle. You come down the chute,
Right.
Or the neck of the bottle, and then you're inside the main chamber.
So this mud and dirt that's beneath us, this would have been a lot deeper, actually.
Oh, yeah. And whenever we've excavated, you could go down probably for another, 4 feet.
Okay.
Before you hit the actual original bottom of this chamber.
What initially appeared to be a cave was actually an ingenious storage facility. Everything was specially designed to hold and preserve Lamanai's food and water. They were often shaped like clovers, located near the center of a courtyard, and placed at a slight angle so the rain would just filter in, filling the cistern. Extended families were responsible for maintaining them.
When other cities are unable to access water, and they're going to these caves to do all these rituals to petition the gods to make rain and to so that things get better, the Maya at Lamanai don't have that problem.
Lamanai survived 500 years longer than the majority of other Maya cities, but they still met their doom sometime around the 1600s. No one knows exactly what happened in Lamanai's last days, but there may be clues buried under 4 feet of mud.
This one has yet to be excavated.
Oh, okay.
So I'm sure that if we start to dig down below, it's likely that you will find skeletons.
Really?
But why would skeletons be found at the bottom of a water cistern? Jaime has a theory as to why this cistern would have turned into a sacrificial altar.
In my ideology, the underworld is this watery place. That's where they get life-giving water. And then the underworld is also a place of death. And so it makes a lot of sense that the Maya, once these no longer function, or serve the purpose of containing water or for food, is that they would convert it to a place of the dead.
If Lamanai never suffered from the harsh droughts, famine, and war that other cities did, why would the Maya here commit the same gruesome sacrifices as their desperate neighbors? Most experts believe that Lamanai was eventually terrorized by a far worse fate: the Spanish conquistadors, who decimated millions of natives throughout the Americas. The skeletons still buried under the mud may have been a mass grave, the result of the ruthless Spanish invasion. One of the last cities of the great Maya civilization that ruled over this continent for 2,000 years was annihilated.
What's the real core reason for the disappearance, in your opinion?
The Maya are victims of their own success. At the time of the decline, the population was at a maximum. And it took a lot of work to sustain this large population.
They had overdone it. There were too many Mayans, right?
Yeah. And so eventually the system, fails. The rulers are the ones that communicate with the gods to ensure fertility, bountiful crops. And when, this starts to fail, the people turn against the elite.
Right.
And what do rulers often do? If you have an internal problem, you try to create an external one. So warfare increases.
Yeah.
I think at the core, the Maya system failed. It no longer was able to sustain it.
It's amazing to think of a 1,500-year-old storage Chiltun out in the middle of the rainforest, right under the floor. And the river water and the thousands of storage Chiltuns may have sustained the Lamanai people longer than most, but it didn't save them from their eventual fate.
By the time Spanish conquistadors swept across the Americas, the Maya had already been decimated by centuries of drought, famine, and war. Their civilization had lasted for thousands of years, but how? A dark tunnel beneath a long-lost city may reveal the magic of the Maya. Over 40% of Belize is under archaeological protection due to the extensive Maya sites found there. Years of brutal warfare may have caused the death of the great Maya civilization, but war alone doesn't explain the mystery of its sudden disappearance. Some say it was the toppling of the Maya religion that led to mass chaos and rebellion. Kings of the Maya city-states were considered to be godly and used terror to control the masses. How did they lose their godlike status and grip on power? Today, the clues to those mysteries may be found in recently discovered tunnels buried under an ancient Maya city. It's located in the jungle just outside San Ignacio, a small city in the western part of the Cayo district.
I'm gonna meet Louis Zaidan. He grew up in this area, knows it like his own backyard. He was telling me he's been to dozens of Mayan sites that are still actually buried by the jungle. They just don't have the money or time to excavate them all. And they're in a constant race against treasure hunters to get to these sites first. These are huge, ancient cities, perfectly preserved. And he's gonna take me to one right now.
Hi, Dom.
How you doing?
Luis took me 12 miles outside of town to the isolated Maya site of El Pilar, which straddles the Guatemalan border.
Spectacular vista. So, I'm the king of El Pilar, surveying my kingdom. What do I see before me?
You see 80% of the forest that is here right now was all gone.
All clear.
You see plazas, courtyards, farmland.
One of the biggest city-states within the Belize River Valley, El Pilar covered more than 5 million square feet. At one point, more than 50,000 Maya lived in this area. The city consisted of at least 3 large sections, north, south, and west, that were connected by wide causeways. The Maya began building here in 450 BC and continued to work and live at El Pilar until 1000 AD, some 15 centuries. After 1000 AD, the city simply vanished, and the jungle reclaimed the land.
So this is a significant city we're standing on.
Oh yes, this was like like your cities of Chicago or all of these, these metropolitan cities.
But Chicago is less than 200 years old. El Pilar survived for 1,500 years. And buried underneath these mounds are clues that reveal how El Pilar remained one of the dominant city-states in the region. A secret tunnel used by the high priests and kings to inspire awe and fear in the people.
Look at that. It just peeks up. What is that?
That's definitely a temple. When you see a temple like that, you know that it's in a private area. This was where your Trumps and these are where these people live. This is where the people with the money.
A fancy neighborhood.
Yes, it's like Buckingham Palace. You just don't walk in there. This is like that.
Today, howler monkeys rule El Pilar. But 1,000 years ago, the northern section of the city was home to El Pilar's VIPs. It was called Jimena, or the Place of the Priests, and it used to be one of the most restricted areas of El Pilar. The high priests used the tunnel as a form of magic, appearing and disappearing in and out of the dreaded underworld, all in an effort to control a population living in an uncontrollable land.
This is the House of the Bats, Zotsna.
You ever been in there?
Nope.
We're how deep at this point?
About 20 feet, I would say. This would have been plastered. As you can, there's a little bit of it still here, and probably even painted.
This 1,000-year-old secret tunnel called Zotsna once connected 2 plazas and was used by the priests and elite of El Pilar. But Zotsna may also have been used as another kind of secret passageway, one that led to the Underworld, the domain of the gods.
In some cases, we find where there's a temple, they would hand dig, they would dig out a tunnel or a cave underneath the temple, so it would represent the underworld for them here at this site.
Maya temples and tunnels beneath them were made to imitate the natural world, so they were built like mountains, places to get close to the sky gods. And the tunnels beneath them were made like caves, entrances to Xibalba, the place where the gods of the underworld lived.
You see, we call it a temple today, but in those days they call it a witz, which means mountain.
So it was the perfect representation of a mountain, a natural mountain, with the peak and the caves beneath it.
It's a perfect representation of their religion.
The Maya priests, or shamans, were considered intermediaries between the human and supernatural worlds. They would travel deep into the underworld and then emerge from these secret tunnels as if by magic, to relay the message of the gods to the people. These elaborate ceremonies also ensured that the rulers maintained their power over the people. After it was abandoned, a section of the tunnel collapsed, blocking the passageway of the high priests. But 1,000 years ago, priests would have been able to walk beneath the plaza and exit here, unseen.
So this is the temple right above the tunnel.
Yes, see? It would have come out right here.
Oh, interesting.
Right where the population would have been. Imagine a priest coming out through there, magically appearing out of the darkness, because in the tunnel it's going to be dark.
Sure.
He coming out of Xibalba, the place of fright.
Yes.
for them. He went there for them. He has been in there probably even for 2 or 3 days, praying to their 9 gods, and then he comes out and then he reveals whatever the gods told him to the people.
And that gives him the authority to lay down the law.
Yes, because the authority of Xibalba is with him.
The people believed their high priests were responsible for the city's prosperity. By pleasing the gods of the underworld, El Pilar prospered for 1,500 years. But in 1000 AD, the end of days fell upon El Pilar. Some speculate it was drought, famine, or a massive earthquake. Like other Maya cities, El Pilar began to crumble. The high priests were unable to appease the gods, and the people began to abandon their religion, lose faith in their priests, and eventually desert their cities. No one knows for certain what sparked the catastrophic collapse of this huge metropolis. El Pilar is still riddled with tunnels, tombs, and passageways once used by the elite, and there are more excavations to be made throughout the site.
Let's see if I can get in there. Wow, it really goes down deep in here. Oh, no, I can't get down that far. But this is all tomb. El Pilar has barely been excavated, and there's way more to this city under the jungle. Most of the excavation on this site has been done by grave robbers. Still, right beneath me are more levels littered with artifacts and ruins. But the real story is hidden underground.
Maya high priests couldn't have predicted the ultimate demise of their great kingdom. But the Maya calendar tells a different story. It was the most accurate in the ancient world, and it predicts the apocalypse is just around the corner, the year 2012. Clues to the Maya prophecy of doom can be found deep in a jungle cave, a portal to the dreaded underworld. The country of Belize could fit inside the state of New Hampshire. It's less than 9,000 square miles.
Just over 1,000 years ago, the Mayans began to deeply enter into caves, cenotes, and tunnels that previously they wouldn't be caught dead in. Now, it seems to me that the Mayans had grown desperate to appease the gods, and most importantly, the gods of the underworld. Now, there's one cave here where the evidence shows not just sacrifices to prevent drought, famine, and war, but a more desperate sacrifice to prevent the end of the world.
16 miles from San Ignacio, in the Maya Mountains, is a recently discovered cave called Chechemha. The cave was found on the property of William Plates, a local guide. According to William, the cave may hold clues to the Maya's bleak view of the afterlife and an eerie prophecy of doom, the year 2012.
Oh, look, we're just right in the side of the mountain here.
This is it, the entrance into the underworld.
It just drops right down.
William discovered the cave on his land back in 1989 when he was out walking his dogs.
And I saw them coming down in and down to this little hole. I saw them literally disappear. So I started clear cutting some of the brushes and slowly moving some of the rocks, which as a result of that, I noticed the hole got bigger.
An intricate system of natural caves, Chechemha stretches for 820 feet inside the range of limestone hills known as the Maya Mountains. The cave winds down 120 feet below the surface. Like other natural caves, the Maya believed this to be a portal to the underworld and performed ritual sacrifices here.
A lot of this here had to do, nearly the front had to do with like a permission, I would call it more as an entryway into the underworld, an offering to their gods.
So before they even came in this place, they were asking permission.
Exactly. As you could see, there's...
William found evidence of the bloodlettings and divination rituals that took place here, offerings to appease the gods below. But as William explored further into the cave, he began to realize it had a vital connection to the ancient Maya myth of the underworld. The Maya underworld is divided into several distinct levels, each presided over by its own god. It's possible that when the Maya found this cave, with its long, dark passageways leading to distinct levels, they immediately made the connection between the two and believed each section was home to the gods of Xibalba. According to Maya religion, there are 9 levels in the underworld, and for the Maya, numerology was absolutely essential. They divided the universe into 23 levels, 13 above, 1 for daily life, and the dreaded 9 levels of the underworld below. The Maya also calculated a universal cycle of creation and destruction. They believed the Earth had been created 5 times and destroyed 4 times before. Currently, we are living in the 5th and final era, one that will end in 2012, the date of the final apocalypse.
There's so many pots there. Perfectly intact, right where they left them. Right where the sacrifices were done.
The ceremonial pots found here date back at least 1,200 years. They make up what's probably one of the largest collections of Maya pottery ever discovered. They were usually filled with offerings, like water, if they were praying for rain from the god of water called Chak.
We're just at the entrance. So level 2, as we continue deeper down, it has a higher significance. The deeper you were going through, the more special you would have to be in the high ruling system at the time being. In other words, you're getting into some serious stuff down there, man. Take a good look at this one, man.
You can see a skull there.
That's a skull. Got little claws.
This sinister-looking monkey figure is one of a handful found in Belize. The Maya believed monkeys were messengers to the gods of the underworld. So when this monkey figure was found on this ceremonial pot, it's possible it is a sign that this was Xibalba, the place of fear.
It's like a perfect artifact in a museum, and it's in a cave, essentially in a man's backyard.
What's your little scene? So we got a rope there. You take backwards. Yeah, the rope is to avoid any expressway down.
Faster into the underworld.
Well done, watch yourself there.
All right.
Welcome to level 7.
We had descended nearly 120 feet beneath the jungle. According to William, we were in a section of the cave that represented level 7 of the underworld. It's hard to imagine the terror a Maya would have felt here. Their underworld was a place of terrible suffering, darkness, cold, and physical torture. Perhaps as their empire crumbled in the 10th century, and the real horrors of famine and war drove them down into this cave, it may have seemed to the Maya that the prophecy regarding the end of the world in 2012 was coming 1,000 years too soon.
An ancient Mayan would only come here, would only dare to come this far down if their needs were most intense, if they had an absolute need to talk to the gods.
Exactly right. You ready for it?
Sure.
I'm gonna go.
Wow, here we are, down at the lowest level of the underworld, level 9.
We had reached the lowest level of the cave, and for the Maya, it may have represented the last level of the underworld. The 9th level of the Maya underworld was the most terrifying of all. It was ruled over by the god Apuch. He appeared as the head of an owl on a rotting human body, and once you fell into his clutches, there was virtually no escape for all of eternity. Where most Maya had thought of the 9 levels of Xibalba as a netherworld, these Maya had literally climbed down into hell.
What is it?
Well, what we got here now, this is the Ring of Stones, represents an altar. This is the final place, man. If you look up above, it's one of the highest points of the whole entire cave.
Imagine the whole ritual around here, the firelight, the smoke, the chanting.
Then this whole entire side would be eliminated. You would probably have a gathering of maybe 5-6 people.
So the priests are
Priests,
here. Okay.
high rulers.
And they're dressed in their formal gear. Their
Formal gear, burning incense right there, doing bloodlet sacrifices, it's been considered.
So they are literally bleeding for the gods here, in the depths of the underworld.
This is it. This is the ultimate.
We're at the end of the Mayan civilization here.
At the very end.
But what would have driven the Maya to venture this far into the underworld? Were they hoping their gods and ancestors could save them from extinction?
The Mayans had a premonition about the demise of their own civilization, and they were right. And they also predicted, very specifically, the demise of all civilizations, the year 2012. And down here, I mean, their fire went out. They were right about themselves. Hopefully, they weren't right about us.
Today, less than 200,000 descendants of the Maya remain in Belize. But its jungles and caves continue to offer up more clues about their rise and ultimate demise.